to conferences all the time is the main driver for progress in your skill set and also your relationship. And basically, any professional can become a better professional by attending conferences.
It's not the standard, okay? It's a movie theater, but the visual is great and the sound is great, and I've seen a lot of room and space, and I think it's organized well.
Seeing all the people here today and they're excited about stuff, and you can see the energy and the desire to learn and do new things.
And I was positively surprised about the depth, the technical depth of the sessions, and how that makes the tester part of the team.
I think developers do benefit from coming to QA conferences, just the same as testers can benefit from going to dev conferences. You've got to have a broad understanding of what's going on.
It's really inclusive. I would say it's super diverse. People are really, really open and friendly, and it's really organized.
Conferences are well worthwhile just for the ideas that they spark in people. When people come back to the office, they're full of ideas and they're all energized up.
So thank you everyone for joining this session. My name is Joel Montvelisky, and I am coming to you from Israel. I am Practice Chief Solution Architect, and it's really a pleasure to be with you on this session today. The name of the session is Let's Focus More on Quality and Less on Testing, and it will be basically try of an understanding of how I think we should start helping to evolve the process of quality assurance as a whole. But beforehand, a little bit of how it is. Why should you listen to me? Who am I? So hi, my name is Joel, and I am a tester. I have been in testing for over 20 years now. And during this journey, I have been everything from a tester, QA manager, lead, director. Also have been a consultant in testing, a speaker in a number of sessions, as well as having a blog, a podcast, and all sorts of other stuff. And today I work at a company called Practitest. I will get into that in a second, where I basically wear two hats. One of them is the Chief Solution Architect, basically working with the team in order to create a good product. And the other one is as the person in charge of testing. And on purpose, I'm not calling myself a QA manager, because I'm only in charge of the testing, and you will see a little bit more about it when we get to that a little bit later on the presentation. About Practitest, and again, very, very quickly, the company I work with, it's a QA management solution. It's an integrated test management solution. So if you're looking for something good, or you're looking to get something better than what you have, or only interested in listening, it's a great system that helps you to integrate your process with other tools as well and manage the whole manual and automated testing process internally. But again, enough of plugging. Let's actually go into what we want to talk about. So this is an interesting question. I'm asking you to stop focusing on testing. So how come? I mean, why should we stop focusing on testing? Isn't it our job? So in order to start with that, I actually want to start with a question. And I want to ask you a question, and please try to think about yourselves. Obviously, we're scattered all over the world, but I want you to think about the following question very, very thoroughly. What value do you provide to your company? And by value, I mean that sense of value. I mean, bottom line, how are you making your company be more successful? If you're a business, then how are you making more money? If you're a not-for-profit organization, how are you helping them in order to make a better job and provide a better service? Now, this is a hard question, so I'm going to break it down into smaller questions. Okay? Usually we don't ask that question, so let's start by saying, okay, so think about what decisions you help to make in your organization. Think about how do you change the way your company is delivering your products. Are you making it better? Are you delivering more products, stuff like that? And think about it, if you were not there, what would be different? And by you, I don't mean you, person, Joe, Jane, Michael. I mean you, your position. What would be there? Now, if you want to go ahead and write it down, that would be great. But more importantly, keep it on the site, and we will get back to them in the next 20 minutes or so. I'm going to be talking today about evolution. Okay, I'm a big believer in evolution. I love reading about history, and one of the things that you notice all the time is that everything is in constant evolution. Everything is changing as a path, and everything is changing as a consequence of multiple things actually coming together, and the need also coming together. And this is the same with software development and software testing. Our evolution looks more like this, where we started with the waterfall models. And again, we started way before, but to put a point, let's say we started with waterfall models, then we evolved a little bit into V models. We got all the way to iterative models like Agile, and then we got into DevOps. And what I want to do right now, I want to take a little bit of time, because I want us to understand what have been the steps that we've been taking, and why have we been taking those steps, focusing mainly on the software testing point of view. This is what interests us. But let's actually start with my starting point, and it's my starting point because that's how the world was working when I started back in the late 90s with the waterfall and V models. And if we look at it only from, let's say, the small lens of what testing is all about, quality assurance testing is all about. So back in the waterfall and the V models, we were working under the assumption that when we started the process, those requirements were completely ready and complete. Nothing was supposed to be modified afterwards. We got a book of requirements or a set of requirements, and they told us, hey, when you finish the project, this is what needs to be delivered. No work in the middle. Obviously, back then, the development and the testing teams were working completely separate. We had separate even phases that we were working on. And as we were talking in a workshop that I was doing yesterday, basically, they threw the software to us over a wall so that we tested separately. The work was based on cycles. We were working in, I don't care if it's 2, 3, 4, 5 cycles that they were converging into a big release. By the way, by big release, I mean releases that used to last anything between 3, 6 months, all the way to a year, 18 months. It was not unheard of, and I worked on a number of projects where our release cycle was 18 months. So we're not releasing, we're releasing basically every year and a half or stuff. Very important, the products were being shipped to someone else outside the team, outside the company even. And because they were being shipped to someone outside the team and the company, then feedback came to us, not directly, but via third or fourth sources. So someone in the customer was talking to maybe someone else in the customer organization, and then that person was talking to our customer support, and our customer support was then talking to us. So there were a number of hops until we actually got that feedback from the customer. By the way, feedback on the good or the bad. But it actually took quite a lot of time in order to reach us. Back then, the objective of testing and the testers, and this was my objective, basically, was to find all the bugs before we released the product outside. Meaning, we were signing off on disks and CD-ROMs and stuff, saying, hey, this has reached a level of quality, basically insinuating that we found all the bugs that were in there, so that we ensured the final product had the level of quality that we wanted there. Now, obviously, this was not the case. Obviously, there were always escaping defects. And more importantly, they used to blame us, meaning who's to blame for bugs being released? The guys who did not find them, not the people who actually add them in there. And it was not even a thought to think that it was not feasible to find all the bugs. You were basically asked to find all the bugs in there. So we move forward. And in the early 2000s, people started thinking and talking about iterative models as the agile model or the extreme programming, stuff like that. They took more force towards the 2010s when people started working more like that. And let's take a closer look into the iterative models. By the way, something that people don't realize, iterative models like Agile, they did not come because development wanted to work in smaller sprints. At the beginning, when they asked us to work in smaller sprints, we thought it was impossible. It came from the market asking us to release faster because it was inconceivable that a product should wait a year or even 3 months in order to be delivered, because we needed to come to market all the time with new features and new functionalities, something that today we see very, very common. Back then, it was like, oh, let's see if we can even make that happen. Now, looking into the iterative models, and again, from the perspective of testing. So first big change, development and testing are working on an integrated group. Many times what happened is that they took the large testing teams and they broke us down and injected us into development teams. So we were not really sure what we should be doing over there. No one actually explained what was the job of the tester, and so everyone assumed it was to do the same that we used to do up to then, and that was, let's test all the features. And so it became very confusing. How do you do it in 2-week or 3-week sprints? And then is when we started seeing all sorts of additional thinking, like the Agile testing books by Lisa Crispin and Janet Gregory, and other things actually coming in place. Another very important thing is that user stories were supposed to be elaborated by the team. It was not a final idea. It's something that we could actually talk about and review internally within the team. We were told that development should take a more active part in testing. Some people went as far as to say that developers should do testing, and so they fired all the testers from their teams, released a couple of very, very bad releases, and then hired them again. But developers should do testing. Not that it happened that often. It was mostly on a theoretical basis, but that's what happens. And as I was saying, we were working on faster sprints with the idea of delivering quickly in order to meet that need from the market. Still, most of the times we were still shipping products outside. We were still working with disks and CD-ROMs. So yeah, it might be delivering or even downloads, but feedback still got to us from third or fourth sources because we were not running the systems by ourselves. So the objective here shifted because we started to work together with development. We realized that we needed to deliver quickly. We couldn't cover everything. So we needed to work more in conjunction with them. By the way, back then, people thought that the magic would come from automation, debunked over the years. And so we now understand that it's a combination between automation coverage and manual testing, exploratory testing, and everything. But we were here in order to deliver quickly, in order to generate more value and get feedback from the teams. And it was great. Meaning moving to Agile was very, very hard because we needed to shift our mindsets, but it actually brought us forward. Now, something happened along the way, and we got into DevOps. It's interesting from the evolutionary perspective to understand how we got into DevOps, because DevOps was a convergence of methodology and technology coming together. On the one hand, yes, we did a switch to Agile methodologies. We were releasing products, creating products faster, but that came in conjunction with the internet revolution and everything going over to the web, and us, more importantly, hosting our own products. It started when, instead of sending stuff to someone else to install it, we started installing it internally in our servers. It started by having two teams. Basically, we had a development team doing the Agile processes and releasing every 2 or 3 weeks. And then we were shipping it still to the operation teams. These teams was actually running the servers, and we were asking them to, every time we release it, go ahead and install it. It took a while to understand that it was not immediate how they could install it, because we didn't create a process that would allow them just to deploy it quickly. So the people from operations started asking us to create that product in a way that would be easier for them to deliver it, to deploy it, and to manage it. So we in the development groups needed to learn more about how they did in operations. And at the same time, we started asking the people in operations, hey, if you have a small configuration issue or stuff like that, go ahead and change it. Meaning you should be able to tweak the code if needed. So we asked the people in operations to become a little bit more like the development team. What happened was that we started saying, hey, you should be more like these guys. And we started saying, hey, you should be more like those guys, until we realized that it made a lot more sense to have one team that would actually encompass both of them. And so we came up with the concept of DevOps, that basically means that we're merging between that development team that is doing the planning, coding, building, and testing. Like in theory, it should be done with the iterative or the Agile models. But then, instead of shipping the product, we deploy it ourselves. We operate it. We monitor everything that is happening in there. And we take that as inputs in order to plan, code, and build. Now, we need to understand something. Those organizations that say that they're working DevOps, but they have development teams that they're doing all the development, and they have 1 or 2 DevOps teams, that's not strictly DevOps, because that basically means, oh, we have a group of people developing the software, and we have an operations teams that it's a little bit more into the development head. But the whole idea of DevOps is that you are working together. You are everyone doing actually the same in there. And that is extremely important. It is extremely important because what is giving us the strength in DevOps is the fact that we're operating our software and monitoring in order to understand what is going on, so that we can then take that information and feed it into the process. DevOps feels a lot like Agile, but it's very, very different. Because, as I said, if we're running the product, then we're able not to wait for that feedback to come from third or fourth sources. To put it bluntly, if we release a product and we have issues in there, we will see those issues popping up on the servers that we're monitoring. If, on the other hand, we are releasing a new feature and we expect people to go crazy over it and use it, we will be able to see if people go crazy and use it. We won't need someone else to tell us if they're making more money or not. On the other hand, if we expected that feature to be used by a lot of people, and we can monitor and see that it's not being used by all the people that we expect it to, then we can understand that there's a problem in there, and we will need to fix it. Okay, so monitoring has a very, very big effect. And a very important side effect is that the cost of fixing bugs went down incredibly. And if it goes down, that means that sometimes it's cheaper to release bugs into production than to find them and fix them before we release the product. If it takes a lot of time to find them and they're not very critical, then we might decide to just monitor very, very, very well and make sure that if something happens, we will be able to find that in production and fix it. So when we look into the objective of that testing team, those testers within the DevOps organizations, then we say, hey, wait a second, we need to work with development quickly and then enable the stability during the deployment process, and making sure that we can gather that feedback very, very quickly from production into the engineering process as well. So we're expanding testing all the way into production as well, in those testing productions and monitoring environments that we have. Now, people might think that, yes, we started there and we stopped there. But if you have been paying attention to what's going on in the internet and around the communities, then you might have heard about a new concept, okay? Evolution hasn't stopped yet. So if we stopped at DevOps, at the previous slide that I showed, right now you can see that some communities are talking about something called modern testing, or even DevOps testing, or DevOps monitoring. It doesn't really matter. It's more or less everyone is talking about the same thing. And I want to use the modern testing option just to make sure that we take one of the schools. And I like modern testing mostly because it's something that I learned from some pretty cool people, and I want to share it with you. So if you haven't heard about modern testing, go ahead and pay attention, because it's really, really cool and really, really important. Now, modern testing doesn't mean testing the modern times. No, it's an approach to testing that's a little bit different to what we might have been ready up to now. It was originally defined by Alan Page and Brent Jensen. They have a podcast called the A/B Testing Podcast. There's actually right now a community around them. And if you go to moderntesting.org, you will be able to get all the information. So all the credit comes to them. I'm only just sharing the information. By the way, Alan and Brent used to work in Microsoft. Brent is still in Microsoft. He's now a data scientist. Alan's actually at Unity. But again, very, very good things coming from them. Now, if you go to moderntesting.org, you will see this page. It has quite a lot of information. I want to go very briefly. This is not a modern testing talk. I just want to go very briefly about some of the things that are important from what they're saying. First of all, I was a little bit shocked at the beginning, but modern testing started with a mission statement. Okay, what is modern testing about? What is the objective of modern testing? It is to accelerate the achievement of shippable quality. And I want to let that sink in for a second. What we're here to do is to make sure that we can deliver quality faster. Okay, we're not in charge of quality. We're in charge of accelerating that delivery. We'll get to that in a couple of seconds, but this is too high level, meaning, yeah, well, how do you do it? Alan and Brent, together with the modern testing community, they came up with 7 principles that I want to share. And these are the 7 principles of modern testing. And let's go over them. I will say something after we review them. So the 7 principles can be found in there. And again, there's quite a lot of information after that. But the first principle says that our priority is improving the business. They make it very clear, we're not here to find bugs, we're not here to work on quality. No, we're here in order to make sure that we're making more money for the business. Now, yesterday on the workshop, I was asked, hey, what about making more money in the short run, but forfeiting money in the long run? No, we're here in order to think also about the long run. It's not only about making a quick buck, but it is about how, remember that first question that I asked? It's how can we improve the business? Second principle goes into a little bit into how. What we do is we accelerate the team. You can see it here, using models like lean thinking, theory of constraints. In my mind, that is a little bit less important. And our objective is to identify, prioritize, and mitigate bottlenecks. We're here to find where the bottlenecks are and solve them. Now, I haven't talked about testing. I'm talking about looking into process bottlenecks or issue bottlenecks or technological bottlenecks and fixing them, finding how we can accelerate. It's not a one-time deal. It's a continuous improvement effort. As we see, we're a force of continuous improvement, helping to adapt, the team adapt and optimize in order to succeed rather than providing a safety net. So we're not here in order to find those bugs, to be that safety net of quality that never really worked that well. We're here in order to make sure that we improve the process all the time. We do care deeply about the quality culture. It's part of what we're here to do. And so we coach, lead, and nurture the team towards a more mature quality culture. So we care about quality culture, but we don't care about it by, quote unquote, injecting quality by fixing the bugs. We care about fixing the culture itself. Important here, and I mentioned this a second ago, we believe that the customer is the only one capable to judge and evaluate the quality of the product. A lot of you might say, yeah, obviously, but no, here what we're saying is that we cannot say, let's say by measuring escaping defects, if the quality of the product that we delivered was good or bad. Only the customer will be able to judge, and the way that the customer is able to judge is whether they will use or stop using or invest more or invest less on the product. And quality will be reflected based on their usage. We use data extensively to deeply understand the customer usage and then close the gaps between product hypothesis and business impact. Basically, we will look into the data in production to make sure that we understand that, yes, users are receiving what they wanted. That's the gap between hypothesis and business impact. And last but not least, we will see testing in the modern testing principles. We expand testing abilities and knowledge across the teams, understanding that this may reduce or even eliminate the need for a dedicated testing specialist. And here we're saying now, open out loud, we're here to make sure that people understand what testing is all about, even if that might mean that there won't be a need for a dedicated tester within the Agile teams. Now, I want to stop here for a second. And my guess is that many of you are currently feeling like, okay, yeah, it sounds like it's correct, but it also sounds like you're living as outside of these definitions a lot of things, meaning we're doing a lot of testing, we're doing a lot of work with developers on that. Where is all of that? And I had the same feeling at the beginning, meaning I felt bad because it sounded like they're talking about something that is correct on the long run, but I cannot actually focus on that because I have a lot of things that I need to do on the short run in order to make sure that my company will not sink. Okay, and I still need to focus a lot on testing and finding those bugs and fighting to make sure that those bugs are fixed and we don't delay them for later. But that is basically focusing only on the today instead of trying to nurture the tomorrow. And this is where the modern testing principles are coming. And once I made that realization that, yes, this might not be my reality today, but I need to start working on this reality for tomorrow, that is when I started making a shift. And that is when I was able, personally, Joel, to adopt more this approach and expand the way that I'm working today. And once I realized that, then I went back over to the mission statement for modern testing, and I had a realization. I understood something that I hadn't seen before. When we talk about accelerating the achievement of shippable quality, we're basically saying that we're going to be shifting our focus from testing into quality assurance or into quality engineering. Testing will basically help us work today, but if we want to strive tomorrow and we want to do it better, we need to make sure that we're doing quality assurance and quality engineering in our organizations. That means that we won't have that time, even the attention, to be the only people doing testing, maybe the main people doing testing. So if this is the case, meaning what does it mean to me? How am I going to be changing this? Who's going to be doing the testing? And how do I make this happen to me and my team tomorrow? Now, it was not an easy task, and what I want to show you here, it's not something that is theoretical and I thought about. No, it's something real. Meaning one of the things that we're doing in my team in practice is we actually adopted this and we're trying to work more along these routes. And when I look back into what we have been doing the last months, then I basically came back to something that looks like this. This is a mind map. I'm hoping that you know what mind maps are a great tool in order to organize your thoughts and understand what's going on. This is my mind map on focus on quality and on testing. Obviously, you can take a look into it. You can get ideas, but I do recommend that each one of you, if you want to adopt something like this, you should have your own mind maps that are saying which are the points that you want to focus in and what are the areas that you need to work with your team in order to make this happen better. What I want to do right now in the second part of this presentation, if I manage to capture your thoughts and say, yes, well, maybe we need to put less efforts in testing and put more efforts into cloud engineering, let's see how I translated this in my team, and maybe you can get some ideas on how you can start translating that into your team as well. Now, each one of these branches, it's a separate area, and I want to go over them and give you some of the examples that we're doing quickly. So the first thing, and I guess that I put it first because it goes with the process, meaning we work DevOps, and so everything is around the stories that we have. But one of the points that we understood is that stories are seldom very well written. Even when you have a process, when you think you have a template, there are usually quite a lot of gaps in there. And so there's a lot of work that we can do on making sure that the user stories are validated better. To give you some ideas, one of the things that we're trying to do in practice, and I think that it's the same for most DevOps organizations, whenever you start a new feature, you start with an MVP. An MVP stands for minimal viable product. That means we have a feature that is yay big, but we think that it's what the customer wants, but we're not sure. As we said, only the customer will tell us. So let's make something that is smaller. We might be able to release it in one sprint. And then let's validate if we're on the right track and get feedback from the customers. Now, it's easier said than done. Usually, there's quite a lot of thought into, okay, what needs to be there, what doesn't need to be there. So you need to be able to have that MVP, and it's hard work. You need to make sure that that user story is an MVP in itself. Now, I also said that the idea of an MVP or modern testing even about measuring means that you define the success criteria of your user story. So to give an example, maybe we're adding a new feature. Maybe we're improving a feature in the system. How do you know if that improvement actually helped or not? If more people use the feature, or if the people is used more by the people who are working on that. So do you have the way of meaning, did you think about what is that measuring criteria? Meaning, are you going to be translating that into dollars? Are you going to be translating that into clicks? Make sure that that criteria is part of the user story so that you know how to measure it. And then point number 3 is that make sure that you have the correct instrumentation for that. Because if you know that you want to measure, for example, usage of a feature, but your monitoring is so high level that you're not able to correlate the use of that specific feature or not, then you're not going to be able to measure it. So you will need to define good instrumentation for that, and that is part of the user story validation. Additional things that happen quite a lot and people don't realize is that as your product continues expanding, you will have conflicts and inconsistencies within your product. Maybe you're duplicating the functionality that you already have somewhere else. Maybe in one area you're doing it this way, and this area you're doing it that way. So let's make sure, and this is something that testers usually, because we look into the whole system end-to-end flows, that we're able to see that. It's important to make sure that it's there. Usability and accessibility, it's extremely important, and it needs to be part of those user stories. Do we need to allow to access that feature using the keyboard and not the mouse? Do we need to make sure that it stands with all the different standards for accessibility? All of that is to be part of the feature. And obviously, let's make sure that we capture inputs from other departments. It's incredible how many times you deliver a feature outside only to have, let's say, the customer success team saying, hey, well, we had other customers who were asking for this, and it would have been nice if you got their feedback into that. So let's make sure that we talk to other teams in organization. Okay, and all of these are things that we could be doing better and we could actually do in order to increase the quality of the end product. Moving to another side, another one of our branches, I want to talk about bringing customers into the process. Now, if you have tens of thousands of customers, if you have hundreds of thousands of customers, then it's impossible to bring all the customers into the process. But you can bring more of the customer into the process if you make sure that the testing team and the development team are part of those calls. In the past, it used to be visits. One of the things that I used to do quite often is just, again, get on a plane and fly to customers to talk to them. We don't do that quite a lot since March. Hopefully, we'll do it next year. But we still have countless Zoom sessions. I already had one before this call, and I have 2 more today. So don't make them only with the product team. Bring people from the testing team, bring people from the development team. Make sure that we are part of that process and we get feedback from actual users. Yes, you might only talk to 3 or 4, but it's better than talking to none, and you will have better understanding on that. Try to create personas or user profiles. That's a pretty cool option where you basically define the profile of the user, and it helps the people to create the user story better, even to validate if a bug is critical or not by evaluating with a persona in there. And whenever possible, try to use real data in development. And I mean here in development and testing. Okay, so we're making this feature. Let's see how it looks when you actually add real data from customers that has, I don't know, a lot of data or different data or images or stuff like that. You will be able to validate it easier. And because we are working in our own servers, then it's easier to do it. You still need permission, you still need to anonymize it, but it's easier to bring that data, or at least data like that, into the system. You don't need to guess that much anymore. Now we go into something that I was talking yesterday on my workshop quite often, and that is, okay, it doesn't mean that you don't need to do testing. It means that you need to train people to do testing. And when we're working on a DevOps team, on a multifunctional team, then you have a lot of other people in the room. You have developers, you have UX designers, you have customer support. You have quite a lot of people who can actually help in testing. But you need to make sure that you train them and you coach them correctly. Again, I talked about this for 7 hours yesterday, but in a nutshell, first of all, you can generate training for new developers or everyone in the team. If you have a training program that expands over a couple of weeks, whenever someone joins the team, have modules about testing. What is testing about? How do we do testing internally? How will they do testing when the time comes for it? Okay, so have that. Make sure that you have a good definition of the testing process. What do we mean by it? Well, testing should start by having someone assigned to the user story so that we can think about scenarios, and then we create the test artifacts, and then we run it, and we have briefings and the briefings, stuff like that. Have even a cookbook, a list of steps so that people can follow it up. Don't assume that people know what you mean by that. A very cool way and very effective way of training people is to do pair testing sessions. I do it quite often with developers where we test with them together. At the beginning, I do most of the testing and they listen. At one point, then I give them the keyboard and the mouse and I keep quiet and I just write down whatever they're doing and try to give them feedback so they can actually do it. It's just like learning how to drive. At the beginning, you see someone driving, then someone sits next to you and explain what you're doing wrong. And then you drive by yourself. So it's very much like that. And the single most important thing that I believe can help to improve your testing is to have pre-briefings or briefing meetings and debriefing meetings with developers whenever they need to do testing. On the briefings, just make sure that everyone is aligned on what needs to be done in testing. Before they go, it's 3 minutes, no more than that. But then they can go and run the session of testing that they need to do. And once they are done, you do a short session of debriefing. What did you test? Let's see if you didn't forget something that I believe you should be testing. What did you find? Based on your findings, should we be doing other testing in there as well? It's incredible how many things you actually find that people missed and should be checked in there. So again, without going into too much details, it's very, very important to do that. Now, it's not only about explaining to people how to test, it's to make sure that once you ask them to test, they will be able to test correctly. And again, I say here developers, but take it for everyone on the team. In my team, for example, customer support and customer success do quite a lot of testing. So first of all, I mentioned the testing cookbook, a guide on how to test, including, for example, guides and links to good information. Testing environments are critical. If you don't provide an environment with realistic setup and realistic data, most people will test on vanilla environments where bugs simply don't happen. Or they test on environments that are so, looking for the right people, for the right phrase, dirty, that any bug that you find will be discarded as, oh, well, that's data that is not real, so we shouldn't work with that. So try to have a realistic environment, try to have a realistic setup. If you can have Docker environments where just bring it up and people can work with that, great. If you have a testing environment on AWS or whatever you're hosting, that's even better. Make sure that people can actually work with that. And also have the correct test artifacts for developers. By test artifact, I mean the test plans, test scripts. So in my experience, developers don't really like the same kind of test scripts that we testers like. I also don't believe that I've been able to, there are some developers that are pretty good at exploratory testing, but not all of them. Some of them do not have the testing mindset, and it takes a while to generate it. So it's better to have checklists and heuristics and sanity scenarios that will help them to test what you're looking for. And so checklist is a very, very good way of working with that. And heuristics that will explain to them, okay, what do I mean by data? Oh, so I have a list of different data inputs that I can use. All of that will be very handy for them. Something that we need to realize is that as we go over to DevOps, we expand the realm under our jobs to move over also to the release process and to the deployment process and to the monitoring process. What does that mean? If up to now I used to test, for example, only the product, maybe the installation on my mobile device, now I need also to test how do we release it onto production. Now, releasing to production, depending on your operation, it's not going to be easy. So you need also to test how it behaves like that. Okay, do I know how am I going to be releasing that? If something goes wrong, how do I go back? Let's actually go into this. So first of all, make risk assessments. Every release is going to be a little bit different. Let's try to understand which are the risks of this release. Am I going to be having can I have data loss? Am I going to have data migration? What will change for users? What happens if I make the change in the middle of the user working with that? All of that kind of things. There are many ways to do deployments and migrations, so you will need to use how to work with that. Does it need to be a stage process? Do you need to do canary releases? Again, there's quite a lot of thinking into that and a lot of options, so you will need to think about that as well. As I mentioned, if something goes wrong, what is your rollback plan? Did you test it? The reason for that is that if you need to roll back, usually it's because something bad happened and you need to get back to where you were very quickly. So you need to make sure that you practice that and you can do it without thinking, obviously. And also schedule notification. Depending on the type of release you have, you might need to schedule it during the weekend, during the nights. You might need to notify ahead of time. All of those are things that makes quite a lot of sense to plan them ahead. Product analytics are a big part of how you define quality and how do you know if you have the right thing. Basically, if before we used to say, well, we have the testing team who's doing the testing, and so if I make any changes, they will find the bugs because they have enough time. And then we thought that if we had a large enough automation test suite, we can make any change and we will find those bugs quickly, and we realized that that was not the case. Today, we understand that if we want to be able to release quickly, we need to be able to measure very well what's happening in production, okay? So we need to have very good product analytics. Do we have good instrumentation? Every user story, did we validate how are we going to be measuring that? Do we have good dashboards and alerts? Meaning we shouldn't need to search for issues, they should jump to us. So you should have good alerts and you should have very, very good health dashboards. All of that will be under product analytics. And last but not least, on the things that I think should be done, and I mentioned this briefly when talking about the user stories, is the coordination with external teams. yes, we need to gather the needs and the inputs from everyone, but it also comes from us outside. We're going to be releasing a new feature. How do we communicate beforehand? How are we going to make sure that the user is trained before they get the feature so that they can use it and give us feedback? All of those things need to be considered and thought of before. And in that sense, a very big question is, okay, so who do I need to talk to? The answer is everyone, from your program and project management team all the way to your customer support and customer success organizations. Obviously, if there's documentation to be done, they need to be part of the process. Everyone who has anything to do with customers, and that's usually everyone, maybe other than accounting, should be part of the flow, and you need to make sure that they're also part of the team. So once again, this is my three, but it's constantly changing. This is the one that I have right now. But this is why I say that we need to start focusing more on quality and less on testing, because there's quite a lot of things that we actually need to do on that part. And as you obviously understand, it's not a change that you do in one click. It's a process where you start basically the coupling. It might start with helping others to test, and then we can start working in other places. You can choose basically where to start. So we can go back to our original question. Okay, what value do you provide to your company today? And maybe we can go back to the original sub-questions that I asked. What decisions do you help make today? How do you change the way your company delivers product? And if you're not there, what would be different? And what I'd like you to think about right now is, if you wrote down your answers, try to look into what you're doing right now. And in light of everything that I talked about right now, try to think if there's something that should be doing better in order to add higher value, additional value, more value to your company by focusing more on quality and a little bit less on testing. With that, I want to finish and thank you all for being here. This is my contact information. I don't answer very, very quickly, but I do answer to every email. So you can write to me if you want. Go ahead. This is my Twitter handle. I don't use it as often as I should. And I do have a QA blog with all the projects that I take part of, so you're more than welcome to follow. And I think that we should be going over to questions at this point. Obviously, you can also send them to me via email if you want.